Como um país onde a maioria da população era de analfabetos até há pouco tempo, saltou para o topo do ranking internacional entre os melhores avaliados no setor de educação? Para responder a essa pergunta e explicar os detalhes da reforma promovida pelo Instituto Nacional de Educação de Cingapura, veio ao Brasil, a convite da Fundação Itaú Social, o professor Lee Sin-kong, que é o convidado de hoje do Roda Viva Internacional.
Boa noite. Estamos no ar em todo o país pela TV Cultura, pelas emissoras afiliadas e pelo nosso canal no YouTube. Hoje, a bancada de entrevistadores é formada por Denis Mizne, diretor-executivo da Fundação Lemann; Flávia Yuri Oshima, editora de educação da revista Época; Priscila Cruz, presidente executiva da ONG Todos pela Educação; Fábio Takahashi, repórter do jornal Folha de S.Paulo; e Tatiana Bello, especialista em educação da Fundação Itaú Social. Contamos, como sempre, com os desenhos feitos em tempo real pelo nosso cartunista Paulo Caruso. Agora você pode acompanhar o Roda Viva em seu celular e também rever entrevistas anteriores. É só baixar o programa na loja de aplicativos do seu aparelho. Professor Lee Sin-kong, muito obrigado pelo comparecimento ao Roda Viva e já de saída eu cumprimento o senhor pelo belíssimo trabalho desenvolvido em Cingapura. Esse é o tema do nosso programa. E eu começo perguntando o seguinte: entre todas as medidas adotadas que justificam a extraordinária evolução do sistema educacional de Cingapura, qual o senhor considera a mais importante?
Well, in an education system, it has to work as an ecosystem. But within the ecosystem, there are two really very key important factors that really impacts how the ecosystem achieves in terms of its outcome. The first is the quality of the teachers. The second is the quality of the school leaders. And these are to be supported by policies and resources, as well as the societal recognition of what the education profession is about.
Era muito baixa a qualidade dos professores de Cingapura quando a revolução educacional, pode chamar assim, começou?
Not really. In the early stage, when the education system was developed in Singapore, the teaching profession was very well recognized and well respected. And because of its high prestige and respect, the students that choose to join the teaching profession, they come from a rather higher, segment of the school cohort. And as an outcome, I think the quality of the teaching force in Singapore was relatively high, even at its early evolution. But progressively, the landscape changed. When there is a greater demand on the manpower requirements of Singapore because of its proactive economic development, particularly in the area of commercialization and industrialization, where other professionals are now required, professionals like engineers, quantity surveyors, medical doctors, and accountants, and so on. Now, because of this demand, there is a redistribution of our manpower resources. And as an outcome, as time progresses, the number of students and the level of those students in terms of quality that enters the teaching profession begins to decline somewhat. And as an outcome, the government recognizes the importance of good quality teachers that would nurture the future of the nation in the children. They begin to take initiatives to reverse this trend such that the good quality students continue to come into the teaching profession to lift up the quality of the teaching force.
Perfeito. Priscila, abre a roda.
Olá, professor. Professor Lee, é o caso de Cingapura, em que a política educacional, a educação, ela é muito valorizada pela sociedade. O senhor mesmo falou aqui na sua primeira resposta que a sociedade de Cingapura valoriza a educação. E é o que acontece em vários dos outros países que estão no topo do ranking do PISA, né? Coreia do Sul, Finlândia, você tem um amplo apoio da sociedade, não é só do governo. Que não é o caso brasileiro. Aqui no Brasil, a educação só passou a ser de fato encarada como estratégica, importante depois da Constituição Federal de 88, e a gente ainda tenta caminhar para realmente fazer com que a educação seja uma prioridade no país. Mas Cingapura também nem sempre teve essa mesma valorização da sociedade. Então, o que eu queria saber é o que o Brasil, o que nós podemos aprender com o caso de Cingapura em relação à valorização social da educação. O que a gente pode aprender com o caso de vocês?
I think one of the very important point about recognition, it is to recognize the contributions of the profession to the development of the country. I think in the past, the contributions of teachers are not so well articulated, and as an outcome, the society does not fully understand the contributions of teachers and the importance of it. In the mid-1990s, in the process of reversing the decline of quality students coming into the teaching profession, the government identified and articulated the important contributions of teachers. And they coined a 7-word statement that really describe the contribution of teachers. And this statement says, to mold the future of the nation. The children are the future of the nation. The teachers plays a crucial role in shaping them, in educating them, in nurturing them, so that when they graduate and become part of the society, they form the future of the nation. So if the important role of teachers can be recognized, then the society will grow in terms of their regard and respect for that profession. Now, in addition to this recognition, the good works and good contributions of teachers must be widely publicized so that society can be educated to understand the good effort and the hard work of teachers and their contribution. In Singapore, so the second area of recognizing teachers is to celebrate their good works. And every year, the first Friday of October is recognized as the Teachers' Day. And during this day, the teachers are celebrated, and being recognized for the good works they've done in educating the children. And certain teachers who have outstanding contribution, they are recognized with awards given none other by the President of the Republic of Singapore. And a group of teachers will be invited to the Presidential Palace to celebrate Teachers' Day. And the President himself personally will host that event and will give out that award to the teachers, the winners of the Presidential Award. So through all these various initiatives coming together to really publicize and educate society of the important contributions of teachers, that helps to the society to recognize and to respect the teaching profession progressively.
Denis.
Professor Lee, o senhor está falando como em Cingapura vocês conseguem de novo atrair os melhores para a profissão de professor. Eu queria que o senhor contasse um pouco do sistema depois que vocês os atraem. Quer dizer, me chamou a atenção em Cingapura que para ser professor você tem que se formar entre os melhores da sua sala, para poder querer aspirar a ser professor. Mas imediatamente quando entra na profissão, o Estado, antes mesmo quando ele está se estudando para ser professor, ele já tem um salário, ele já tem um apoio, recebe uma formação muito bem feita. Eu queria que o senhor falasse mais sobre esse sistema de formação dos professores antes deles entrarem em sala de aula.
To build up a quality teaching force, I will often say that there are two very important steps. The first step is to attract the best quality students into the teaching profession. And the second is to give them the best training so that they will be equipped with the skills and the knowledge to be able to educate our students. Now, how do we know what to educate these teachers to provide them with the necessary skills, the relevant skills? I think this comes very much from the clarity of the desired outcomes of education. You see, the government has to be a leader and a driver in this aspect. When you educate a generation of students for the workplace or to enable them to contribute to the development of the country, we need to understand what skills these students ought to acquire, what knowledge they ought to acquire so that they will be able to really support the economic activities that requires those skills. So the government has to identify what I call the desired outcomes of education. That means at the end of, say, 6 years, 10 years, or 12 years, what should the student attain in the process of their education? Now, this desired outcomes of education becomes the compass that helps to design teacher education such that the teachers will be equipped with the relevant and the complementary skills that will really able to, for them to educate our students to acquire such skills when they graduate. So our teacher education program are very much designed to achieve this goal. So every teacher that graduates from the National Institute of Education that enters the school system will have acquired a certain set of competencies that align to the desired outcomes of education, and that will enable them to do a good job in the schools. Now, to attract good quality students into the profession, the government has to set in place a series of initiatives that really not just makes the teaching profession a respectful one, but it also makes the teaching profession equal in terms of its importance to any other profession that helps and contribute towards the development of the country. And to do this, they set the beginning salary of a teacher to be equal to that of a beginning engineer or a beginning accountant that enters the government service. So a message given that the teaching profession is equally important as any other profession. Second, they develop 3 career pathways that will enable teachers to be promoted in the course of their journey so that their work will be well recognized. In the beginning, there is only one track that promotes teachers. That means in the leadership track, whereby the teacher will be promoted to a head of department, to a vice principal, and then to a principal. But those who are very good in the teaching in the classroom, they are often left out. So the government recognizes this and the important roles of these good teachers. So they develop a teaching track that allows good teachers to be promoted to senior teachers, lead teachers, and master teacher. And those who have specialist knowledge of, say, curriculum design or in terms of counseling, they are promoted along and developed along what we call the specialist track. So with these 3 career tracks in place, every teacher now have an opportunity of advancement. Now, in addition to the rewards in terms of the salary, plus the advancement of his career, I think that attracts good students into the teaching force. And in Singapore, we recruit teachers from the top 30% of our student cohort.
Bom, vamos terminar a roda ainda, completar a roda nesse bloco. Fábio.
Professor, o senhor acha possível esse sucesso que houve em Cingapura ser replicado em outros países, e especialmente no Brasil, que tem um tamanho muito maior, outras características sociais? O senhor acha possível um país como o Brasil ter esse desenvolvimento rápido como Cingapura teve em educação?
It is difficult to transfer a model from one country to another simply because the context and the environment may be different. But there are certain lessons that could be drawn that could be adapted and adopted, say, in Brazil. Now, what are some of these lessons? I would say that, firstly, to raise up the teaching profession to be one that is respected, that is recognized for their good contribution. Now, how can we do it? I believe the continual education of the society on the important contributions of teachers in terms of educating the future generations that will help in terms of the development of Brazil. If that important contributions can be educated and society comes to know about it and embrace it as part of their understanding, I think that will be one step. So you begin to really, the government has to take a process in which how the contributions of teachers can be well publicized in the public domain. Now the press as well as the social media platform today also offers another platform in which the contributions, the good works of teachers can be publicized and educated. In fact, every good teacher's work can be celebrated in the social media. You see, the unfortunate thing today in many education systems, they focus on a few teachers who may not be doing the job well. They continue to criticize the profession as a whole instead of celebrating the good works of many teachers as apart from just a few. Now, if good works of teachers can be celebrated, I think that contributes another process of building up the teaching profession. If you do not have a Teacher's Day, if I may not be aware whether you have a Teacher's Day in Brazil, but if you can celebrate this Teacher's Day in a greater way, in a more visible way, and if there can be awards as well being given to teachers in terms of recognizing the good work or extraordinary work, I think that will also help the society to understand the good works of teachers and their contribution. I know the other part of it will be the rewards in terms of the monetary rewards of salary and other areas that such rewards could be given. Fiscal or monetary rewards could be given. If this can be done, I think that will even help to elevate the teaching profession even further. So, in summary, it is not that you can directly transport everything, but you can draw some principles and lessons and adapt them for the Brazilian landscape.
Okay, thank you.
Flávia.
Professor, boa noite. Eu entendi que os melhores alunos é que podem concorrer à vaga de professor, mas não necessariamente um excelente aluno vai ser um excelente professor. E eu queria entender como é que vocês fazem essa avaliação, como que o professor é avaliado, se de alguma forma isso está diretamente ligado à avaliação que é feita com os alunos.
Excellent question. A top student need not be a good teacher. And I think I've seen that personally in my course of interacting with students. So in Singapore, the selection process is a very important part of teacher recruitment. Now, before any candidate is recruited as a teacher or recruited as a student to enter training as a teacher, he or she has to go through a two-step process of evaluation. The first step is based on the qualification or the certification that the student has. The student must have a qualification in terms of subject knowledge, a mastery of a subject knowledge to be able to become a teacher of that subject. Let me qualify. If you are to be selected as a mathematics teacher, the student must graduate from the university with a mathematics degree and a background, so that you have the mastery of the project, of the subject. Then the second is, you may have the subject knowledge, but can you teach as a teacher, interacting with the student as a teacher? Then this is where the second stage of recruitment comes in. We have an interview. The panel of the interview comprised primarily of senior school principals and ministry officials. Now, senior school principals are very well versed on what is required of a teacher and what aptitude the teacher should have to be a good teacher in the classroom. So in the process of that interview, the answers given by the students or the candidate during the interview process will enable the principal to understand whether this teacher has the passion, has the communication skills, as well as has the aptitude of wanting to interact with students and be able to teach the students well. So through this two-step process, we are able to select students who has not just the mastery of the subject, but also the aptitude and the quality or the attributes that will enable them to be a good teacher when they go through the process of training.
Tatiana Bello completa a roda. Temos 3 minutos para pergunta e resposta.
Tá certo. Eu acho que eu vou continuar, então, falando sobre a questão dos professores, que realmente é um ponto central, né, quando a gente pensa a aprendizagem dos alunos. Eu gostaria de saber, nessa formação continuada, depois deles em sala de aula, como é que vocês fazem para pensar em formas de enfrentar as desigualdades na sala de aula, pensando as diferenças aí que existem entre os alunos, sejam socioeconômicas, sejam de etnias, se vocês têm algum tipo de ação nesse sentido.
You see, in enabling students to learn, there are many factors that affect the learning of the students. The social factors are one. For example, socioeconomic factor is one. Second is the support of the home in terms of the student learning. The second is actually education, where the teacher's contribution, the curriculum, as well as the learning environment becomes very important. Now, for the social factors where there are inequalities, in Singapore, the government seeks out those students who are slower learners and to understand the reasons why they are slower learners, and will institute learning support programs to enable them to take on extra lessons and all those to help to catch up in terms of their learning. And if financial difficulties is the reason behind all this, the government has a certain scheme to help the students or the family to support the educational requirements and resources that the student will need to enable them to learn. So that is one part on the social factor. For the educational factor, you are absolutely right in terms that as time progresses, student learning also change. You know, in the past, our students will often learn, just sit down in a classroom and listen. But now, many of the students want to engage themselves in the process of learning, questioning, and not satisfied with answers and pursue further. And teachers has to be re-equipped in terms of their skills to deal with the new generations of students. So the professional development of teachers in Singapore is given an exceptional important emphasis. In fact, every teacher in Singapore today is given 100 hours of professional development time during office hours. And they are sent for retraining and further enrichment programs that will not just equip them with new skills, but also help them to understand the new learning profiles of students of today so that they can identify with them and then adopt the appropriate learning strategies that will enable them to learn.
Vamos para um rápido intervalo e voltamos em seguida com a entrevista com o professor Lee Sin-Kong, ex-diretor do Instituto Nacional de Educação de Cingapura. Estamos de volta com o professor Lee Sin-Kong, ex-diretor do Instituto Nacional de Educação de Cingapura. Professor, para que os nossos espectadores possam avaliar a diferença entre os dois países, eu primeiro registro que o Brasil tem mais de 12 milhões de analfabetos com mais de 15 anos de idade e pergunto se existem ainda analfabetos em Cingapura, analfabetos adultos.
If you talk about at the beginning of the independence of the country in 1965, our literacy rate will be about 70 to 75%. And in today's world, in terms of being employable, your literacy and numeracy skills are a requirement. So it is through educational effort since independence that our younger generation begins to really proactively acquire literacy and numeracy skills. And that in the process of the last 50 years until today, I would say that hardly 2 to 3% of our adults now are illiterate.
Professor, uma das coisas que chama a atenção nas suas respostas e olhando para o sistema de Cingapura é como as coisas são todas interligadas. A maneira de selecionar os professores, o foco que os professores aprendem na universidade, o currículo que eles têm que ensinar aos alunos, o que é esperado que os alunos aprendam e assim por diante. No Brasil, nós não temos ainda um currículo nacional. Não é claro o que é esperado que cada aluno saiba a cada etapa da sua aprendizagem. E a gente tem uma formação de professores que é feita por algumas instituições, o material didático é feito por outras organizações, a avaliação é feita por uma terceira, cada um com seu pensamento e a sua lógica. Quão importante é a definição de um currículo claro, de expectativas claras do que é esperado que os alunos aprendam e como integrar isso aos demais aspectos do sistema educacional?
I would say in any education system, one of the most important aspects to consider it is the desired outcomes of education. Because that will be the destination of a learning journey. You know, just like us, if we want to go to any place, we need to identify the destination before we can plan our journey. So in Singapore, we are fortunate enough that we have a government who understands the importance of identifying the desired outcomes of education, which will then serve as a compass in terms of understanding what skills and knowledge that our teachers ought to have in order to deliver this education that will achieve the desired outcome. It will also direct the way in which curriculum can be designed that will help our students to acquire the desired outcomes of education. So I would say that it is of paramount importance that the desired outcomes of education ought to be identified to serve as a destination to which a journey can be planned. And I would like to quote an example. The state of Delaware in the United States, when they began a reform journey for their education just about a year or two ago. And we were discussing how to do this reform. And they also begin to recognize that you need to have that end goal of education identified to serve as the compass in which the journey is to be planned. And they have developed their desired outcomes of education, and they name it North Star. And with that as the destination, they're able to articulate the curriculum, the teacher education, as well as whatever learning environment that need to be provided to support the learning.
Priscila.
Professor, por conta desse descaso todo de séculos, que talvez tenha sido o maior erro histórico do Brasil, o descaso constante com a educação, e que só recentemente a gente realmente conseguiu ganhar um pouco mais de velocidade, a gente tem várias agendas que a gente precisa agora cumprir todas ao mesmo tempo. A gente ainda tem a agenda quantitativa, a gente ainda tem muita criança e jovem fora da escola, tem a agenda da qualidade, que é garantir que todo aluno aprenda, tem a agenda que a Tatiana estava falando, que é da equidade, que é super importante, porque sem equidade não tem qualidade, e tem ainda uma quarta agenda que ajuda a explicar as outras três, o atraso das outras três, que é a agenda da inovação. O quanto que a escola hoje ainda é um dos equipamentos que menos mudou em séculos, em anos. Qual que é a função estratégica da inovação nessa política de Cingapura para chegar no topo dos resultados?
One of the strengths of the Singapore education system is it is a very responsive system. And in terms of responsive, I mean that as the world changes, we look at how education needs to concurrently change to meet the needs of this new world. This is where identifying the desired outcomes of education becomes very important. Desired outcomes of education should not be stagnant. It should be progressive and must respond to the world changes. Take, for example, in the 21st century, where employers and workplaces require what they call a set of 21st century skills beyond what the technical knowledge and technical skills are. So one of the desired outcomes of education must then respond to say that by the time the students achieve, its graduation in year 12, he should not only know all this, but also a set of the 21st century skills. Now, to achieve that, the teachers must be trained and re-equipped with an understanding of how to equip the student in a process of education to achieve that 21st century skills. So what I'm trying to say is that the desired outcomes of education is so important that it will drive not just curriculum change and all the other change, but innovation as well. Because if, let's say, you need to require a student to achieve a certain set of skills, you need to innovate in your pedagogy, innovate in your curriculum design, innovate in your learning environment in order to help the students to achieve that desired outcomes of education. So in Singapore, the system is so responsive that the desired outcomes of education move as the world change. And that drives innovation in the schools in the area of teaching, in the area of curriculum design, and in the area of learning environment design. Because to achieve the education goals, as I mentioned right from the start, it is an ecosystem approach. There are many components all in place, then and aligned, then you can achieve that desired outcomes. But the most important thing is identify your destination, and that is the desired outcomes of education. And even once you have that, and as it progressively move on, you will drive innovation and other aspects of what constitute educational delivery.
As habilidades do século XXI já estão no currículo nacional de Cingapura?
Oh, it has been included many years ago.
Ok. Essa
Because
é a
we are
resposta.
talking about 21st century skills in the first decade of the 20th century. If you look at OECD, look at their articulation of educational needs of the 21st century, there is a great set of articles written about that. And the government of Singapore is very sensitive and cognizant of such changes, and it brings about, the change of the desired outcomes. And in fact, in Singapore, if I were to say, the iteration of educational shift in terms of philosophy in response to the world changes, since 1965, we have 4 major reiteration, and within each iteration, we do refine as the years goes on in response to the changes that are taking place.
Fábio, depois Flávia.
Professor, ainda no tema inovação, gostaria de saber qual é o papel da tecnologia nas escolas de Cingapura. Tablets, celulares e outros equipamentos são utilizados frequentemente ou vocês investem, apostam em outras medidas de inovação?
Technology are only tools. Before you use technology, you have to understand why you want to use them and what they are meant to help in terms of the process of learning. I think this is a very important approach that we take when we consider technological tools as part of the innovation process of learning. In acquiring 21st century skills, I would say that the technological tools are very important, simply because technological tools can enable curriculum delivery and curriculum design to be done in such a way that will empower the students to do a few things. 1, to be a self-directed learner. 2, to be able to learn with lots of questions and lots of thinking, because interactive activities with technological tools can help to achieve this 2, what you call activities of self-directed learning and questioning and higher order thinking. And 3rd, technological tools can empower the student to also to be creative and innovative, because as if are guided by the tools in terms of the process of learning, the student is able to understand, how some of the sequencing of the knowledge are being given and why they are done in that way. And hence, if they want to integrate certain answers or apply the knowledge to real life situation, they're able to connect very easily. I think for this to be done, the teachers has to be well trained with the necessary understanding and knowledge of using these tools so that the teachers can use this tool in the schools when they graduate and to be able to allow the students to engage in such a form of learning. And it is so important, to stress that for any of this innovation to take place using technology, the skills of the teacher is most important. If the teacher does not know how to use the tools properly or adequately, it will just be a mechanical process.
Flávia, depois Tatiana.
Professor, eu gostaria de saber o quanto da educação em Cingapura ela é pública e privada, e se, quando pública, ela é sempre totalmente estatal ou se existem iniciativas público-privadas que oferecem ensino gratuito para a população.
You may be very surprised to know that in Singapore, every school system to which the students go to, the Singapore students go to, they are public schools. There are very few private schools to which Singapore students go to. And if the Singapore students were to go to a private school, he or she must seek the approval of the Ministry of Education. The reason is very rational here. Education in the schools do not cover only the knowledge and skills that the student will require, but it also emphasizes a lot on national values. Values that can help the students to imbibe and to grow in terms of the type of person, with the right character that can contribute to the development of the society. That is an important part of education. Now, Singapore has a set of national values which we want to inculcate our students with. So that's why we require the students to go to the mainstream schools to help them to learn not just the educational subjects and the skills, but also the values. So the total emphasis on the public school therefore becomes so important from the government. And the government supports this in order that every child from any family, whether poor or rich, will have the opportunity to grow and develop their potential within the mainstream education system. For that matter, I would just like to say this. The government's emphasis on education is so strong that it spends 3.6% of its GDP on education. And it is the second highest budget behind defense. That just shows you how the government places importance in the education of the younger generation.
Tatiana.
Professor, eu queria explorar um pouco mais a questão das habilidades do século XXI, para pensar um pouco, e o senhor nos falar, como é que vocês trabalham também as questões de potenciais da cultura e da comunidade, como é que isso entra nesse currículo, pensando esse desenvolvimento integral do aluno.
The need of 21st century skills by workers of the future, it is driven by the employer market. In fact, the government consults the society, the public, both the employer market as well as parents and professionals, to help them understand what are the important skills that students need to be educated in to be relevant in the future. When you ask employers in the 80s and the 90s, what do you want in your employee that you want to employ or engage? The answer is very consistent. Say, I want an employee who has the technical knowledge and the technical skills, so that on day one when I employ the worker, he can go straight into the factory floor to start the operation. But in the 21st century, especially in the first decade, you'll find very different answers from different employers. One will say, I want an employee who can work as a team. So we ask you why. He took out the handphone. He says that, do you know how many people in a team develop, design, and produce this handphone? More than 100 over. Coming from different gender, different religious background, different racial background, different discipline. And if my employee can't work together as a team, how can they produce this product? So it's so important, one 21st century skill, collaboration. Then another employer tells me, I want an employee who can ask the right questions. So I say, why? He said, today, the issues are so complex that unless you ask the right question, you can never address the issue in totality. So all these are requirements of the employer market. And if you don't drive that in education to equip our students with that quality and attributes and ability to fit into the needs of the 21st century, your students, or when they graduate, will not be employable. So it is the community, the workplace, the employers and the public that really drives in terms of the need to incorporate 21st century skills into the curriculum, into the process of learning.
Temos 3 minutos para uma última pergunta. Flávia.
Professor, o senhor falou, se eu não estou enganado, em 3,6% do PIB ser dedicado à educação. Isso é muito menos do que aqui no Brasil a gente dedica hoje, a gente tem a intenção de dedicar no futuro. E, no entanto, aqui no Brasil a gente não tem dado conta da demanda. Eu sei que é difícil aplicar a Cingapura para o Brasil por causa de todas as diferenças, mas eu queria entender se nesse...
O Brasil reserva quanto?
Por volta de 6%.
6%.
Well, how much a country would devote your resources to education will be a choice of your country. For this, I cannot comment. But in Singapore, even the university, it is public. And every student, 80% of the cost of education in the university is subsidized by the government. And the student only pay 20% as part of the fees to the university as they enter the university.
Vamos para outro rápido intervalo e voltamos em seguida com a entrevista com o professor Lee Sin-kong, ex-diretor do Instituto Nacional de Educação de Cingapura. Estamos de volta para a entrevista com o professor Lee Sin-kong, ex-diretor do Instituto Nacional de Educação de Cingapura. Como nós temos agora menos tempo, eu já passo a palavra direto para Flávia. Flávia, você queria completar a pergunta? Considera respondida?
Não, eu considero respondida. Eu tenho uma pergunta que ela se assemelha um pouco.
À vontade.
Professor, tradicionalmente a educação oriental ela é conhecida por ser bastante rigorosa, no sentido de cobrar disciplina e mesmo resultado dos alunos. Algumas vezes isso acaba virando um fardo negativo para muitas crianças. Eu gostaria que o senhor comentasse um pouco como é isso em Cingapura, como que é a cobrança em cima dos alunos, como é a questão da disciplina e como que é a cobrança também para entrar em universidades em Cingapura.
In the Eastern culture, I think the emphasis of society on education is very high. And the expectation of their children to pursue education and progress in the economic ladder is also very strong. Because I think in the Eastern society, you find that the society actually evolved from very poor background to where we are today. So you will find that the parental support for students and encouraging them to pursue education in the most rigorous way becomes a very strong feature of the Eastern education landscape. This is an advantage, at the same time a disadvantage if you do not manage it well. Now, an advantage from the sense that when parents support the students, they too will provide the resources and the personal time to really mentor the children in terms of their learning. So in that sense, the students will adopt a very positive attitude towards learning. Okay? They are encouraged to learn and they should not be lazy and so on. But on the other hand, if the parental support becomes overly powering, then that requires the student to do this, to do that, and so on. And as an outcome, the childhood experience of the student is totally what you call neglected. I think that is not a good developmental process for the child. And in Singapore, while we do see a very strong support and emphasis of the parents on the education of the children, the ministry often sends out good messages to the parents to help them to moderate their emphasis as well as the way in which they demand out of their children. Because we want to encourage the parents to understand that as long as their children do their best, you must be happy for what they have done. So I will say that, yes, in Singapore, the parents do give very heavy emphasis on the children's education, but we want to moderate it such that they do not put too much pressure on the children themselves.
Eu lembro novamente que este bloco é mais curto que os anteriores, Tatiana.
Tá certo. Professor, o senhor comentou da carreira, né, possível dos professores vir a ser o diretor da escola, né? E eu queria saber, na reforma que vocês fizeram lá em Cingapura, qual que é o papel pensado para essa gestão escolar, né? De que forma deve ser pensada a organização da escola que pode potencializar a aprendizagem? Como é que vocês veem isso?
If you look at the role of school leaders, in the 80s and the 90s in Singapore, they are merely managers. Managers from the angle that whatever the, what you call the way in which administration is to be executed, policies and so on, the school principal will follow the procedures. Take, for example, for buying things, there's a set of procedure. You only follow that, okay? So that is merely management. But the government also recognizes that with the changing time, if the same model of control continues to be in place, then all the schools will be progressing only at this speed. And for those who are very, what you call, passionate about innovation, about progress and change and all those, they will be very much inhibited. So the government began to devolve a lot of autonomy to the schools. Now, what does this mean? The government now gives every school a budget, a block budget, based on the number of students in the school. And the principal has now the power to decide how this budget is to be spent. If you want to develop the school environment and make it better, that is his prerogative. If you want to develop the teachers in other ways, that is his prerogative. So today, the role of principals has shifted from one of being a manager to one of being a chief executive, where he will provide leadership to the teachers to drive change in a way pedagogy is being designed and delivered, or drive change in terms of the learning environment that needs to be changed to support the acquisition of 21st century skills. By the way, 20th century environment cannot support the acquisition of 21st century skills because 20th century environment is for passive learning. 21st century skills needs to be acquired from active learning. So you need to change the environment. So the role of the school leaders is to be the leader that will manage change in an environment of change so as to help to achieve the desired outcomes of education.
Vamos tentar completar a roda. Fábio, depois Denis.
Professor, aqui no Brasil existe uma discussão ainda aberta sobre pagamento por mérito aos professores. Queria saber como é que funciona em Cingapura e qual é a reação e qual é a posição dos professores em relação a esse sistema.
I think if there is a payment or reward based on a merit system, I think that's good. Singapore adopts such a system. The teacher's salary is comprised of two components. The first component is the basic salary per month that the teacher receives. The second component is to be paid out by the end of the year based on the appraisal of the school leaders on the teacher and the type of appraisal grades that the teacher will receive. If the teacher is regarded as a top performer, he may receive a few months of performance bonus. It could be 3 months, it could be 4 months, depending on the scheme that the ministry allows in that particular year. So for those who are non-performers, they may only get a very small amount. Now, we find that this approach will serve as an encouragement to the teachers to perform their best. That is the experience of the Singapore system.
Denis.
Professor, tem muita coisa de Cingapura que parece difícil de copiar no Brasil, pela escala, pela diferença do contexto, mas tem uma que eu vi quando estive lá no ano passado que me parece que dá para copiar, que é o sistema que o senhor mencionou no início, de progressão da carreira do professor, não para virar diretor, mas para ser um melhor professor. E o sistema de virar um department head, depois um master teacher e assim por diante. Queria que o senhor contasse um pouco sobre como funciona esse sistema de, para um bom professor, que é bom em sala de aula, também ter uma progressão de carreira.
The teaching track is focused on the quality of teaching in the classroom. And teachers who are appraised on the quality of teaching is very much observed by senior teachers. If the senior teachers mentor that junior teacher and observe how the junior teacher can progress in the quality of teaching. Now, what do I mean by quality of teaching? For example, some of you talk about innovation. Whether this teacher does look at other innovative measures that can engage the student in order the students will be more what you call engaging, participate in the whole process of learning. And how teachers can adopt certain measures to motivate the students to be more engaged in the process of learning. And how the teachers are able to really bring students together to work on a project that enthuse the whole group and learn in the process and help the students to start thinking aloud and thinking with higher order thinking process. So these are factors that are taken into consideration to determine whether that teacher is ready to be promoted to the next level. Now, promotion to the next level is also very much based on the job specifications of each level of the teacher. If, let's say, a junior teacher has all the qualities now able to perform the job responsibilities of a senior teacher, then the promotion will be given, in addition to all the other observations that are made. And now for senior teacher to be promoted to lead teacher, the consideration of what this person can do at the lead teacher appointment level will be considered. So in order to operationalize this track in the area of teaching, you must really outline and identify very clearly the responsibility and the competencies each level the teacher that's promoted to, have they got it? The highest level at the master teacher level, he served as a mentor and a driver of pedagogical change among the teachers. So that in itself is also leadership. Yeah. So it is a very complex, but yet, with clarity of the identification, this system can be very well operationalized. And I totally agree with you that it is one area that can be implemented within the education system of Brazil.
Nós temos 2 minutos só, mas eu vou querer completar a roda com a Priscila.
Tá ótimo, vou tentar ser rápida aqui. Eu fiquei muito curiosa quando o senhor falou sobre que as escolas são quase 100% públicas porque tem uma intenção do governo em inculcar valores nacionais. E aqui no Brasil isso pode soar doutrinação, que é uma área, assim, que é um tema muito controverso aqui no Brasil, né? Eu queria saber se existe uma disputa ideológica na educação de Cingapura, se isso acontece. Aqui a questão de gênero é super polêmica, principalmente até por conta de setores mais conservadores, etc. Ou se vocês tentam proteger a escola dessas interferências de fora.
There is no ideological conflict in Singapore because the national values that we talk about are mainly universal values. Let me give you some simple example. Honesty and integrity. These are important values for any what you call education system to believe in. Because if you can define this to the students and they acquire it, that will define the quality of the society in the future. If integrity and honesty is very much emphasized, then if this become part of your values, when you go out to work and become part of the society, then trust of integrity and honesty will be very much part of the member of the community, and that will become the character of the community. If there is the other part, where we want to tell the student, be an active contributor to the society when you succeed. There's no ideology involved. It is a matter of how you want the society to grow as a united community. Let the student be grateful for the support that he is receiving now, so that when he succeeds, he want to give back to the society, so that the younger ones can succeed as well. So all these are universal values, and as an outcome, there is not much of an ideological conflict per se. But of course, the acceptance of the community is required, and this is where the leadership of the Ministry of Education in helping the community understand why we need this value education is very important.
Vamos para outro rápido intervalo e voltamos em seguida com a entrevista com o professor Lee Sin-Kong, ex-diretor do Instituto Nacional de Educação de Cingapura. Estamos de volta com o professor Lee Sin-Kong, ex-diretor do Instituto Nacional de Educação de Cingapura. Já passo a palavra para o Fábio, depois o Denis. 15 minutos.
Professor, gostaria de saber quais são os pontos que o senhor acha que a educação em Cingapura ainda precisa avançar e que o sistema precise melhorar.
Yes. The future is very uncertain. The world is changing very fast. Job skills are changing by the day. Many of the traditional jobs today will disappear, by thought leaders who says that, in the next 3-4 years, because of technological advances, many of these traditional jobs will disappear. What is the challenge for Singapore's education? Is how do we continually keep in pace with the change so that we can educate our students that they will have the skills and the relevant attributes that will empower them to be relevant in this landscape of changes. That is our challenge.
Como fazer isso?
Now we have to constantly keep in touch with what is happening in the world. We have to constantly consult employers, consult professionals, where and what direction each of their work or development is going, so that understanding such changes that will take place, we have then considered how do we transform and reform our learning outcomes that will drive the way education can prepare our students to meet these new changes. It is a difficult and a challenging task, but we have no choice but to keep on tracking the change, and sometimes have to gaze into the crystal ball and project what would happen, say, 5-10 years' time. And we take a risk of what we need to do for education to prepare our students for that landscape.
Denis, depois Priscila.
Professor, no Brasil nós temos 2 milhões, mais de 2 milhões de professores, um bom pedaço da população de Cingapura só em professores. A imensa maioria deles está lidando com situações bem desafiadoras todo dia em sala de aula e não recebem o reconhecimento nem econômico nem social que merecem. Eu queria saber que mensagem o senhor daria para eles, para esses professores que estão todo dia tentando fazer o nosso sistema melhorar. O que poderia ser um recado do senhor para eles?
My message will be, believe in what you are doing. You are contributing well to the building of the nation of Brazil. Continue in that good work. And I hope that the leadership of this country will celebrate and give greater recognition to the teachers. Reward part may be one aspect that's difficult to achieve across the board, but celebrating the work and recognizing the good work and let the community understand their good works, that does not need any cost. Celebrate.
Priscila.
A minha pergunta é bem complementar à do Denis, porque você fez a mensagem para o professor. Mas acho que você tem falado bastante aqui que o centro da política de Cingapura, o sucesso é o professor. A gente sempre fala que não tem bala de prata em educação, mas a que mais se aproxima de uma bala de prata é o professor. Qual que é o seu recado se você tivesse que convencer os nossos gestores públicos, os nossos governantes a realmente colocar o professor como o profissional mais importante desse país para a gente realmente conseguir avançar na educação?
I think this is a very tricky question they asked me because I do not know much of the context within the Brazilian landscape. My suggestion will be that if the local community can take its first step to really celebrate the good works of the teachers and continue to emphasize the important contributions they are making to nation building in Brazil, I think slowly this message will hopefully get up to the leadership who will then understand the whole contributions of teachers in totality. I think this is something, you talk about innovation, I leave it to you all as part of the community to see how you can celebrate and recognize the contributions of your teachers.
Tatiana.
Professor, Cingapura é reconhecido pela alta performance das avaliações do PISA.
Explica o que é o PISA para os espectadores que não sabem direito do que se trata.
PISA é uma avaliação que é feita em vários países, né, dos alunos de 15 anos em habilidades de matemática, português, ciências e agora com algumas outras habilidades também, como resolver problemas complexos, criatividade. Eu queria saber que outras estratégias avaliativas vocês usam também lá em Cingapura.
I need some clarification to the question itself. Are you telling me how do we assess skills like in the case of PISA?
Não, outros tipos de avaliação. Que outros tipos de avaliação vocês fazem, se existem outros tipos?
Okay. Now, many people ask this question. Is the assessment model today still relevant or needed? My answer is yes. But your assessment model must progress with time and progress in relation to the desired outcomes of education. Because at the end of the day, your measurement is whether these outcomes has been achieved by the student. So apart from say the way in which you assess the student based on what they know, the knowledge part of it, you can actually design your assessment questions and all those to test also their thinking skills, their creativity skills, and their innovation mindset. You can design your question also even to test the value part of it. So it is a matter of how you redesign and reformulate your questions and the process of assessment in order to understand whether the desired outcomes of education has been achieved. And that's why I said that the desired outcomes of education it's a paramount important part to first develop in education, because it not just direct everything, but it also direct how assessment is to be made at the end of the day.
Flávia.
Professor, em alguns países, como na Alemanha, por exemplo, existe uma cultura muito forte de fazer o ensino médio juntamente com o curso profissionalizante. Eu queria entender como é isso em Cingapura e também queria perguntar para o senhor qual é o percentual de alunos que conclui o terceiro grau, que vai para a faculdade e se gradua.
In Singapore, the recognition that different students have different talents is very visible. Today, you have about 30% of our students going into the university. Mm-hmm. You have about 45% going to the polytechnics, which is vocational. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the rest of the 25%, although not all the 25%, may go to the Institute of Technical Education. So we have a multiple pathway in our education system to allow students with different talents and different interests to pursue.
Mas isso é durante o ensino médio ou é depois do ensino médio, essa distribuição?
It is both during the secondary school and after the secondary school. Okay. Now, in Singapore, we adopt a scheme where we have in the secondary school, after 6 years of primary school, you enter 4 years of secondary school. And within these 4 years, some students will go on an academic path and some will go on the vocational and the technical path. Mm-hmm. Now, this group will certainly enter the polytechnics after 10 years or the Institute of Technical Education. But the first group, even though they are on an academic path, only 30% of the total cohort will go to universities, and the others will also go into the polytechnic. But there is one particular feature of the Singapore education system. I call it the bridges and ladders. There is no dead end. Even if you go to an Institute of Technical Education, if you do well, you can cross over to the polytechnic. And if you do well in polytechnic, you can cross over to the university. So by these bridges and ladders, every child in Singapore, their potential will be met at the end of the day when they put in the effort.
Professor, eu vou reservar 3 minutos para o senhor para concluir com a mensagem que o senhor desejar transmitir aos espectadores como encerramento do que foi uma verdadeira aula magna. À vontade.
I must say that I'm very encouraged in every trip that I come to São Paulo. This is my 3rd trip. And every trip I come when I meet up with educators, not just within the education fraternity, but outside the education fraternity, there is a growing interest within your community on how to advance education in Brazil. And I see the fervent desire, the eagerness, and a sense of urgency. I'm here for this trip at the invitation of Itaú Foundation. And I find that as I speak to the foundation colleagues on the planning of this trip, it was greatly emphasized on learning from outside of Brazil. And this is absolutely important in terms of the process of development. of a country's education system. Singapore's education evolved to where we are today because we learn from others. We learn from UK, we learn from the US, we learn from Japan. We learn not by just bringing ideas from these countries in totality. We learn by picking out lessons, principles that we can contextualize, adapt and adopt in Singapore so that it fits into our local landscape and that it helps our education to elevate. I see this is happening here with that desire. So I give you this encouragement to continue to push on in this journey. And I believe that learning from others and drawing principles of others will help you to leapfrog in that reformation journey. And I believe that if you can prioritize that lessons in terms of, say, which is the most important part, which I commented just now, the desired outcomes of education. If you can identify, articulate that journey, that destination where you want to be, then you can plan your journey in a very articulated and coherent way. And I wish all of you my very best because I have great hope and a great encouragement in what I see every time that I come. That's my conclusion.
Muito bom. A mensagem é muito oportuna porque eu suponho que incontáveis espectadores que acompanharam o nosso programa estão com vontade de viajar para Cingapura. Infelizmente, o nosso tempo acabou. Eu agradeço a participação do Denis Mizne, da Flávia Yuri Oshima, da Priscila Cruz, do Fábio Takahashi, da Tatiana Bello e do nosso cartunista Paulo Caruso. Agradeço a você que nos acompanhou até agora e especialmente ao professor Lee Sin-Kong. Muito obrigado, professor, pela clareza das exposições, pelas ideias moderníssimas e, sem dúvida, muito úteis, né, a quem se preocupa com o desenvolvimento do sistema educacional brasileiro. Boa noite e até a próxima segunda.
Obrigado.